Are you looking for inspiration on a daily basis? Then check out Deal to Heal Teas. With our inspirational teas, you're sure to find something to inspire you. That's dealtohealteas.com. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.com. Again, that's dealtohealteas.com. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, then I know you enjoy the Girl Dad Discussion podcast. I'm your host, Ernest James, and I believe the relationship between a daughter and her father is one of the most important relationships a young lady can have. And therefore, my mission is to promote the daddy-daughter relationship by sharing the voices of girl dads to the world. So check out our podcast on every platform where podcasts can be listened to. And if you want to watch the podcast, check us out on our YouTube channel. Again, that's the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with your host, Ernest James. Welcome to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. On this podcast, my guest and I will discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can live a life that is happy, healthy, and whole. So I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I am your host, Ernest James, and I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you guys go to YouTube and check out our new YouTube channel, which is the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network. It was formerly the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, but now we have more than one podcast. And so we're bringing you more than one podcast. So we turned our channel into a podcasting network. So we're going to be giving you even more podcasts. So make sure you guys go there to check out the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, as well as our sister podcast, which is the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, which is on that podcast. I talk to other girl dads like myself, and we have conversations about the daddy-daughter relationship. And we even have daughters on sometimes. And so all in the name of dispelling and combating the narrative of the absent father and the fatherless daughters. So they are girl dads out here. They are very active in the lives of our daughters. So make sure you guys go and check out the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. Also, so again, thank you guys once again for tuning in to the podcast. Also, our product of the week. As you guys know, we are a self-sustained podcast, and the way that we stay on the air is by bringing you amazing products for you to purchase in order to help us to pay our bills. So our product of the week is our Purpose Journal, as well as our Purpose Planner. So you guys can check that out because I believe that we should journal in order to keep a track of where we've been and where we are at the present, as well as plan for our future. So make sure you guys go to Amazon and get your Purpose Journal and Purpose Planner. The links are in the description below. So make sure you guys go and check that out. So today, just like any other day, we are blessed with the guest, Miss K. Marie. How are you?
I am amazing. How are you?
I am good. First of all, let me say thank you for being here, because you could have been doing anything else with anyone else, but you took out the time to be here with me and my listeners, and we definitely appreciate it. So we're going to jump right in. Do me a favor, introduce yourself to my listeners and tell us a little about who you are and what it is that you do.
Yes, so I am K. Marie. I am a grief and trauma resilience coach. So after experiencing grief and trauma and healing from it, I felt like it was my purpose and my calling to help others. I believe that the things that we go through in life aren't always for us. They are for other
Mhm.
people to help them become healed and whole as they may be going through similar situations. So I share my story, whether it's speaking on stages, small groups, conferences, podcasts,
Mhm.
in hopes to reach someone to help them as they're on their journey of healing. So I'm a mom, a Christian woman, a child of God. Um, I'm just K Marie.
All right, all right. So I want to jump right in and kind of go back, right? So I would say there's always a story before the story, before you became this version of yourself that you are now. And I know you mentioned about there were some things that you went through, but even before that, who was K Marie in your most innocent self, should I say? And then what were some of the incidents that happened in your life and those transitions that made you say, okay, not only did I get through it, but now I'm going to spend my life helping others get through those same things?
So I had to start off by saying I was raised by a phenomenal woman, Marilyn Taylor, my mother. She was probably the epitome of just a beautiful, to me, Black queen. Um, a single mom, took education very serious. Her and my father, divorced and separated, and she had had a stroke at a young
Mm,
age, before she even got pregnant with me. Even she had a lot of health issues, rheumatic fever, aneurysm on her brain, just all these things, and it started with her being pregnant with me, something she wanted more than anything to have a child, and doctors telling her, you cannot have this child. You must have an abortion because if you don't, it will kill you. And my mother stood so firm in her faith and what she believed that she said, I have lived my life and it's been a good one, but I won't live it without this child. So,
mm,
whatever God's will be is what's going to be, but I'm going to have this baby. And grateful that
yeah, yeah.
that decision. um, so, born and raised by her, she was just a very strong woman. Even though she'd had a stroke, her left arm was paralyzed, she could have easily got a disability check. This woman worked a full time job, went to school full time, advocated for women, one of the strongest women I know. And I tell everybody everything good about me I got from my mom, like all the goodness, my heart, my love for people, my love for women, my work ethic, my drive, my motivation, love for children, all from my mother. And the first major event that probably happened in my life was when I was 14 and her transitioning to
Mm,
heaven. And me all of a sudden becoming this child who was motherless, I guess, in a sense. Trying to be strong for others, trying to navigate this new life. My whole life for 14 years, I identified as the daughter of Marilyn Taylor. And now my mother has transitioned. So that's when I think I first was like, well, who am I now?
mhm.
Um, and understanding that. So that was probably the first event that happened in life. And I just remember grieving very quietly and privately because I wanted to be strong for everyone else. It was probably the beginning of me not truly understanding grief and
Mhm.
healing and what I needed for myself because I've always been someone who wanted to be there for everyone else, very similar to my mom. So even in my grief as a child, I would do it very privately because I just wanted to be strong for those others. And I was blessed that my mom's sister wanted to take on, I say, the challenge of raising a teenager because we were 13 years apart. I don't even think I
Mm,
realized how young she was when, she decided to take me in, but 13 years apart. And, she has this 14-year-old teenager that she's raising along with her other children. And, um, just wanting to do right by me and still understanding that the type of mom I had, I can only imagine the shoes she felt like she had to fill. So
mhm.
That was my first journey.
Yeah, and I definitely can relate to that on two things, because one of the things you mentioned about even being young but still wanting to be the strong one, and definitely, just by listening to how you uh describe the person that your mom was. And it was, to me, as you were telling the story, and I'm like, of course, what I mean? Like, if you have this role model, it's like, oh yeah, I still have to be who she was raising me to be, who's the example that she was to you. So it's like, okay, she may have transitioned, but my job as being the person who she was to me and was showing me how to be, I still have to show up as that person. Definitely can relate to that of losing my mom myself, even though it was years later. I definitely wasn't an adult, when I lost my mom, but still, I'm one of nine siblings, so still even having that same that's I'm the oldest boy of my brothers, but I'm the fourth child, and so it's nine of us all together. But even still having that same thought, like, okay, I have to be strong for the others. I definitely can relate to that. And then even dealing with the grief that comes from that. And that definitely, like I say, losing my mom was a part of my cycle, or should I say, beginning of one of the most hardest griefs that I had, as well as losing my mother-in-law before I lost my mom, who I was very close to. And so that's kind of where my journey, should I say, my grief journey really started. Definitely have lost people before that, but those were the two most monumental in my story. So I know you mentioned your mom, but was there other, before you came to this version of yourself, were
Yes.
there other losses, should I say, that may have happened that even more so impacted you? Just like,
Mhm.
okay, now I got to do this.
Yes. So I will tell you, I definitely thought losing my mother would be the most difficult thing that I would ever have to go through. And as I become a mother myself, the love that I had for my children, um, I don't think I quite understood what it was like for my grandmother to lose my mother, because I was
Mm,
so focused on the fact that I had lost her. And I will never forget, it was in 2020, Kobe Bryant and his daughter, unfortunately transitioned as a result of a plane crash. And I remember saying to myself, my gosh, his wife, to lose a husband is one thing, but to lose your daughter, there's absolutely no way. And I said, that is something I would never survive. I said it out loud. And it was April 12th, 2020. It was Easter Sunday. And I decided the last minute to cook dinner for the family. I wasn't going to cook. And my daughter had went to visit her godmother. And she happened to FaceTime me. And she's like, hey, Mom, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I cooked Easter dinner. And she said, well, I think I'm going to come on back home tonight. And I said, are you sure? And she said, yeah, Khalil, and that's my youngest son, his birthday's tomorrow. And you cook dinner. So I'm going to come on back. So I was like, okay. And she had been in Bowling Green probably about 2 hours. So, I wasn't really aware of the weather or what was going on out. And my daughter sent me a message. She said, I'm about an hour out. And we were like, okay. She had stopped and text myself and my ex-husband in a group text. And I don't think I realized the time that had passed because we watched a family TV show. So me, my kids, family, we're just sitting there watching this TV show. And I get this phone call from this unknown number. And I ignore it. And then I get a knock on the door and the phone's ringing again from a 502 number. So I'm answering the phone. I'm getting this knock at the door. And the voice says, do you have a daughter by the name of Kamaria Spalding? And I'm like, yes. And I'm opening this door and I see this man in this blue jacket and another man dressed in a police uniform, and it's pouring down raining. And I'm so just confused. And I step on the porch and I just remember handing the phone off to my cousin. And this man looks me in the face. And if I saw him today, I couldn't tell you what he looked like, but he just says, ma'am, I'm sorry to inform you, but your daughter's been in an accident tonight. Ernest, I will tell you, as soon as he said the words, if I just wanted to cover this man's mouth and not let him speak anymore.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, he had to finish the sentence and he said, I'm sorry to tell you, but she did not survive. She didn't make it. That moment, even looking back, completely like it is insane how one moment will change the rest of your life. And I said before, I'm a child of God. The first thing that I did was I just fell to the ground and I cried out to God and I said, I have done every single thing you have asked me to do. Everything. Why not my child? And then I said, I don't want it to be anyone else's child. I just don't want it to be mine.
Mhm.
And I never wanted to get up. I just, for me, in that moment, in my mind, take me with her. I don't
Mhm.
want to be here. My purpose, my reason, it's gone. And then I looked back at my door and remembered I had two little boys on the other side of that door. And I knew I would have to get up. That moment changed me forever. The old me, the K Marie before, that person is no longer, completely different person now. And that's the part of grief that I don't think that people always realize. It changes who you are, because although I'm still a mother, the thing that's most precious to me is no longer here physically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can relate to that on two things. Number one, when we even think about uh transitioning of loved ones, uh like you mentioned about not really recognizing how your grandmother must have felt to lose your mother, right? Because in our minds, it's always expected. Like, I'm gonna go first. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me prepare my children for living without me, because at some point I'm gonna go. You know what I mean? But when the tables turn, it's like, as a parent, we never think about it. We never hope to never experience it, because it's like, no, that's not how it's supposed to happen. You know what I mean? Like, I'm supposed to go first, and then my child, carries on his legacy, and then to for it to flip, and then have to stand in that space. It's like, okay, what do I do now? Because again, you are still a parent. You are still, you still have other obligations and things of that nature. But yes, those moments do change you. And so I mentioned earlier about my losing my mother and losing my mother-in-law and dealing with the grief at that time. And so in that period, with everything that I was going through, I was going through a divorce at the time. I was in debt because the economy had crashed. And I've worked as a bricklayer, so that's impacted with infrastructure. And because if ain't no money, ain't nobody building, right? So dealing with that, going through my own depression, and then my mother-in-law passed away, and I was very close to my mother-in-law. And then right after that, my mom passed away.
Mm.
So I'm just in this space, and I'm just like, man, I'm having suicidal ideations, and I'm like, my family will be better off without me, and all of those things. And a similar moment, like you mentioned, I have one biological child, which is my daughter. My daughter probably at that time was only like 6 or 7. And I
Mm.
remember this day vividly because we're at the house and I'm sitting and I'm watching her play, she's playing or whatever, just me and her in the room. And she's just having a good little time. And then she stops and she comes over to me and she starts crying. And I'm like, what's wrong? Like, with everything that's going on, with you just having fun or whatever, and nothing happened. Like, she didn't fall or anything, she just stopped and came over to me and she started crying. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, I miss my grandmothers. And it was at that moment because at that moment, little did she know, I still was dealing with my own grief. I was having the suicidal ideations of like, you know what, I think think about taking myself out. But it was that moment that I'm like, what's going to happen to my baby? You know what I mean? Like, if I'm not here, what's going to happen to her? And it was that moment that changed everything for me, because it was like, I can't go nowhere. You know what I'm saying? Especially by my own hand. If the Lord have other plans, then those are his plans. But I can't take my own life, because if I did, I would in turn be taking hers. And so yes, it was that moment like that that just changed the rest of your life. It changed the rest of your the things that you do. And so one of the things that I do, is we both are speakers. One of the things that I talk about very openly now is my depression and things of that nature, and suicidal ideation, because we don't talk about it, as often as we should. Because even as I begin to share my story, and start talking about it, my sister, again, I'm one of nine. My baby sister called me after hearing one episode of the podcast and was like, "How did you go through all that and we not know?" You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, because we don't have the conversations. We, not just we as a family, but we as a culture, as a community, just as people, we're not having the conversations like, okay, what would this look like if we lost someone? Whether we lost them to natural means or accident or by their own hand. Like, how will we, how we have that conversation and how we deal with that? So I make it very, I'm very open about having the conversations now, because we're not, we haven't had it. And it's the whole process of dealing with that grief, that because we're not having the conversations, it's so hard for us to have it. So in your own experiences, I know you speak on grief. How hard is it even to have the conversations with other people? I know from your viewpoint, it's a little easier, because it's like, okay, I made it through it. But to be talking to the person on the other end, how hard is that, just to get them to be like, you have to open up and you have to talk about this stuff, because you gotta go through this journey.
I'm right now, as we speak, helping a friend who is on a grief journey. Their best friend of 14 years passed. So we're talking about with weeks. So it's
Mhm.
very fresh. In fact, I met with them right before the podcast, and it's so difficult because you see where they're at and how bad they're hurting, and you can recall that. But now that you've gone through the steps, you've gotten therapy, journaling. I'm so glad that you talked about that journal. It is something that I feel like everybody should do, no matter where you're at in life. You need to journal and write your thoughts, because a lot of times what we don't understand is we've gone through some very difficult things that in the moment we didn't think we would get past, and then with time, it we've come through it, and it's like, you've been bought through this thing. Why would it be any different? And I never try to push my views on anyone else. So when I talk about God and my relationship with God and my religion, that's my experience. No one else has to share that, but that's just what I've been through that's healed me.
Mhm.
So a lot of times I will bring it up, and I just know what God has brought me through. So why would he choose this time to not bring me through this?
Mhm.
Um, and one of the things I share with people is the moment that I found gratitude. It was probably 2 years after my daughter had passed. I don't know the exact date, but I remember sitting in the floor of my bedroom, and I was just upset and I was angry. And it was like I heard God saying to me, if I told you everything about Kamaria, everything about this little girl, but I told you at 18 years old, I was going to call her back home, and you'd have to go the rest of your life grieving her and missing her. Would you still want to be her mother, or should I choose someone else? And I'm like, no, that's my child. Like, I want to be her mother. You can't pick anyone else. Like, you understand the relationship that this girl, like how we were for 18 years. And then I was like, wow, I got 18 years with the most amazing child. So then I found gratitude. And it's like those moments. And that's what I share with people. I'm like, you're going to have a moment, and I can't tell you when it's going to be. It could be 2 months, 2 years. It might be 12 years,
Mhm.
but there will be a moment. And then you start to understand when the word says everything works for our greater good. Because
Yeah.
I can never say, like, oh, yeah, like Kamari is passing, somehow something, anything good could come of that. Because this child has transitioned, there's a blood drive every single year that's held in her honor because she volunteered with the American Red Cross. We save lives. Every single bag they bring gets filled. They can't keep up. Every year it grows and grows. The largest donation of African American blood, that blood drive that's held every year. There have been two Luna Wellness Centers open for mental health and healing, one in Bowling Green, one in Lexington. There has been a library with the Luna Library, and it is books for children of color. So when you go to this little section in the library, you pick out a book and you see a character that looks like you in an amazing story. And it's not talking about slavery or not talking about something negative, but showing these beautiful brown children doing these amazing things. All of these things and many more, me sharing this story, so many parents I've helped heal from this, all because this child transitioned. It's things like that that I share. And I tell them, in this moment, you're not going to get it. And I don't expect you to. I need you to feel everything that you're feeling. And I know you have to know those feelings are valid, that you have the right to feel them. You know, one of the questions that was asked was, I'm mad at him for leaving. My friend has told me, I'm mad at my best friend for dying. Is that normal? And I said, absolutely. Absolutely, that's normal. You need to feel all of that. The only feeling that I tell people that needs to be talked about immediately is when it's the thoughts of suicide. When you feel like it's so intense that you can't be here anymore, we, we need to, it's immediately, we need to talk
Mhm.
immediately. um, because those thoughts will happen often. That it can creep up even to the strongest, most faithful person. So yes, all of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know what? That resonated with me so much, right? Because even with talking about losing my mom, so one of the things, again, when you talk about getting to the place where you're like really recognizing in your life that everything works for your good, and I talked about losing my mom and my mother-in-law. And so during that period, one of the things that helped me was I started going to bereavement counseling, right? And doing bereavement group. And I loved it so much there that after I think my sessions was like 8 sessions or something like that, but however many it was. But after my time was up, I stayed there and I became a volunteer. And so I volunteered for a year. And then after I volunteered, when I decided to leave, I started a nonprofit called Ann Christine Charities that brought uh, bereavement counseling and bereavement group, the method, to the community, and I named it Ann Christine. My mother's first name was Ann, and my mother-in-law's name was Christine, and so again, not what I had signed up for that, definitely not, you know what I mean? But as a result of it, this organization was birthed, to help people. And the other side of that I talk about is um what I call, and I'm gonna write a book about this, the collateral damage of purpose, right? And
Mm,
so, like I mentioned before, I'm one of nine, right? And so when I lost my mom, I was the only one that lost her. Like my dad lost his wife, my 8 sisters and brothers lost their mom, you know, but I was the only one that got the purpose out of it. You know what I mean? So it was like, okay, God, if you put me through this so that I can birth this purpose, that's good for me. You know what I'm saying? But my dad, my sisters and brothers, they're collateral damage of my purpose, because they didn't get the same mission. You know what I'm
mm,
saying? They didn't get the same purpose out of it, but yet they got the same pain, and so that's just another part of it that I think about when I even having the conversations. Like, yes, we who are blessed enough to come out on the other side, right, and have these experiences that move us enough that we want to change the world. We are blessed to have that transition, but everybody doesn't get that, and some of the same people that went through the transition with you, they don't get that, and so we have to be mindful, even with dealing with them, and allowing them to sometimes they feel some type of way of your purpose. Because I remember when I decided, I had the conversation before, because my mother-in-law passed away 3 years before my mom passed away,
Mm.
and so after my mother-in-law passed away, that's when I first had the idea of doing doing the charity, like really starting something in her name. And my wife at the time, she was saying like, yeah, we should do that. But as time kind of went on, she was just kind of like, not really supportive, or just kind of just like, stepping away from the idea. And even now that I'm thinking about this, wow, even in that, it's like God's like, okay, I got this purpose for you, and I want you to do this thing, but now you're drawing back from it. So now I need to rebirth this purpose again. So let me take your mom now, which is going to rebirth this whole thing all over again. And that's what happened after my mom passed. It rebirthed the whole idea of it, of starting it. And then I was just like, all right, with or without you, I got to move forward with this. And that's what happened. So man, and that just came to me. I never even thought about it that way, but I definitely understand how that, like I said, that collateral damage is like, just like your daughter's father probably was like, he didn't get the same thing out of it, the same purpose that you got out of it. He probably was like, look, I'm glad you're doing your thing, but I don't necessarily feel that same way, and so I think that's an idea. I've thought about it before, but I've never really dive deep into that, just like really understanding from the other person's point of view.
Mm. That is so good. That is so good. I would say, like, one of the things that was difficult is we always consider Kamari the glue. And you'll hear me say Luna. The reason why I say Luna is her nickname was Luna because Kamari means like the moon. So when I was pregnant with Kamaria, I discovered that her biological father and I would not stay together. We were gonna separate, and I wanted her to know that she was a reflection of love. So I chose the name Kamaria because the moon reflects the sun. So Luna, is that's how that came about, and her biological father, it's wild because he's into nonprofit work and charity, does a lot in the community. But my ex-husband, the man who raised her, you're right. He just lost the only daughter that he knew. Like this child who emulated him and had his mannerisms, who he fell in love with long before he probably fell in love with me. He came into her life when she was 18 months old. He's just it's like he's like, I don't understand. Like, where's my greater good in this? So I can see that. Like, for him, it's not the same. Like, he's not the type to go out and share the story. And now there are times when he comes across the parent and he can relate. His childhood friend has transitioned, and the father, they shared a moment because they're two fathers who have now had children transition. So he gets those small moments and impacts. But it can be hard. I will tell you, my friend who is currently going through the grief process, he posted something on social media, and the last thing he said, it said, "Grief is the receipts of loving someone well."
Mhm.
And I said, gosh, that was so beautiful. I'm like, I don't know if he came up with that, if he got it from somewhere, but it was so beautiful to see it. And I'm like, that is true. Like, when you're grieving someone, it is because you loved them well. So don't be so caught up on the pain and the grief. See it more of, you love this person and you loved them well. And sometimes we might need just a reminder of that we have the ability to love, um,
Mhm.
because we know what love is. Love is patient and is kind, and to show love and to express love for another person, that is absolutely beautiful. And the thing that I remind myself of is, you know, the person who loves us the most, the person whose image we were created in, sent his child to pay the ultimate price. So of course he understands my grief,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, yeah. And even to piggyback off what you just said, love is kind, love is patient. I think that oftentimes when we start going through the grief cycle, we forget to love ourselves and give ourselves that same love that we would have given the person who we lost. Like we would have given them love, we would have been patient with them, we would have been kind to them. But now in their absence, a lot of times we forget to give ourselves that same love, and that grief will, and we were talking about this a little bit, that grief will is a never ending cycle. And you mentioned about your friend saying he was upset. One of the things, so I mentioned about starting the nonprofit organization, right? And what we talked about was bereavement, right? And so the church that I was going to at that time, we actually had a um, some kind of event. I don't remember what the event was, but it was like a family and friends event and whatever. And we were having different workshops. So I held a workshop on bereavement. And so I remember one of the young ladies that was in my class. I probably had about 20 people that was in my class, and we are talking about grief. And one of the young ladies, and I'm saying young lady, she was older than I, right? And she was talking about being angry with her husband who had passed. And even in the midst of that, us having a class, she's expressing it, and she started to cry, and she's like, I'm so angry because that wasn't our plan. Like, you wasn't supposed to leave me, you know what I mean? You wasn't supposed to leave and then leave me with these kids, and then I got to stay here. She's like, no, that wasn't the plan. And so she was upset with him. And I remember even another young lady was even talking about how she lost a son. And in her, so, and this is funny with her, because after our class was over, we're done with the class or whatever, and we're wrapping up, and she comes up to me and she's like, I'm so mad at you. And I'm like, you're mad at me? She's like, yes, I'm mad at you. And I'm like, why? What did I do? And she was like, having this conversation, she was like, I realized that she had lost her son, I think like 4 years prior. And she was like, I remember I lost my son, but I had three other sons. And so I focused so much on being there for them that I never took the time to grieve the loss of her son, And so just going through that grief wheel, and feeling those emotions, whether it's going to be sadness, whether it's going to be anger, whether it's going to be laughter, you know what I mean? And just all of those different emotions. One of the things I want people to realize, that it's called the grief wheel. Like, it never stops. You know what I mean? It's like Tina Turner said, the train keep on rolling. That grief wheel keeps on rolling. It doesn't stop. And I would say, depending on which day you wake up, sometimes you deal with it good, and then sometimes you may have some, take some time for yourself and give yourself that grace. And like I said, even with my mom, I remember my brother telling me, this was like maybe like 3 years after my mom passed, and he's going to my mom's house, right? Because my dad was still there, my other sister brothers were still there. And he pulls up in the driveway. And the way that my mom's house was, is the house was here, the driveway runs, on the side of the house, and the garage was like in the back of the house. So there was a bedroom right here in the corner, the front corner. That was my mom's bedroom. And so it's 3 years later after my mom passed, and he's been to the house plenty of times, but it just was this day. He's like, as soon as he pulled into the driveway and like looked at that room, he started crying and couldn't stop crying, and literally had to sit in the car for like 10-20 minutes and just cried, And so that grief, it never stops. It never
No.
stops. So I want people to understand that, like, you're gonna go through all kind of emotions, all
Yes.
kind of feelings, and right when you think you're done, it might sneak back up on you.
Who can it? Like, the best description I will tell you that I've heard is, grief is a backpack that you can never take off. And sometimes it's heavy, and sometimes it feels a little lighter. And I share my story all the time and have no issues. But Ernest, I will tell you, I had to do a little driver's class. I had to do a driver's class, and they were just talking about all these accidents, and and it was over Zoom. I had to privately message the teacher because I was being so triggered in the moment. And I had to tell him, like, because we weren't supposed to cut our cameras off. And I said, I don't know if I'm going to, if this is, I knew that we would probably talk about this and we would touch on this, but I'm being very triggered in this moment. So I'm either going to have to cut my camera off for a second, or you might see me have a moment here on camera. Either way, and he even spoke in class. He just kind of brought it up, I guess, to prepare the class. Like, hey, we all probably know someone who's lost their life, unfortunately, due to a tragic accident. And in my daughter's case, she wasn't speeding. She wasn't doing anything wrong. She had her seatbelt on. There was a witness who saw it all, who ended up finding me and contacted me. And I thank God for that as well, because there's so many questions. It's hard to lose a child and then not be there in the moment that you feel like they need you the most. And it was just like, none of it made any sense. It made no sense. Even the car, which I never saw pictures. I didn't want to see pictures of people who saw the car, said no one should have lost their life in that car. The way it looked, it made no sense whatsoever. And it was just, there was a young couple that stopped. There was a retired, I think he was in the Army, but he was a medic. He was on the scene. He performed CPR. And there was a pastor who stood over her with the umbrella and prayed the entire time. When I tell you God sent the right people, so that there was no doubt, like, was she supposed to transition? That, well, this was the day that was written in the books for her. This was the day, and you talk about that grief wheel. And there are times where I think about the decisions that I make as a mother can have whatever outcome. Because at first I told her she couldn't go visit her godmother. And, then I decided to cook dinner, and then she decides to come home because I could. You think of all these things. Well, what if I would have, and and that's why therapy is so important. Therapy is so important because they teach you to not do that. I woulda, coulda, shoulda. And it teaches you that it's okay to be angry, because there were times I was like, Kamari, you knew better. Why didn't you pull back over? If it was raining, you should have pulled, you go through those things. But at the end of it, I just have to know that was the day that was written in the book for her.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy how, like you mentioned about being triggered in that moment, it's crazy how things happen that kind of brings you back to, dealing with the grief, whether it's hard or not. So I remember one of the things that happened with me, I'm here in the Chicagoland area. So this was a couple of years ago. There was a cemetery that was on the news. It was a whole big scandal of them not cremating people, for them like stacking people in the same plot, like stacking caskets. It was like a whole big thing, right? And so they was all in the news. They were being sued and under investigation and all of this stuff. So it was probably in the news for like a good 2 weeks or something like that. And I remember I have family members that's buried there, including my grandmother. And so I'm like, man, I'm watching this thing on the news, and I'm like, let me call mom and tell her she needs to check on, what I'm saying, what's going on with grandma, make sure that grandma, and as I go to pick up the phone, I'm like, wait a minute, mom's not here either. You know what I mean? Like we didn't bury my mom there, but it was just that moment, like, oh wait, I can't even call her to check because she's not here either, and it's just those moments that you have, and it's just like, oh, because sometimes, and this may sound crazy to some people who may be still in the midst of their grief, but sometimes as life goes on, you forget. And like I said, my mom, it's probably been like 10 years or more at this point now. And depending on what day it is, you can wake up and feel so good and things are going so well that you forget about, someone's missing or something's different, or, those little things just don't show up and you forget. And then something happens that triggers you and it brings it all right back. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, yeah, that did happen. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, oh, right, mom's not here. You know what I'm saying? And so I just want people to really understand, especially dealing with grief and going through those cycles, that you're going to have those moments. You know, you're going to have that time. And again, like you mentioned earlier, if it gets to the point where you're having those suicidal ideations, please make sure that you reach out to someone. Please that make sure that you get help. Don't keep that in. You
Yep.
know, talk to someone. There's a hotline, and I'll make sure that I put that information in the description today, because I want you guys to still be here. I want us to be here to have this conversation a couple weeks from now, a couple days from now, a couple years from now. You know what I mean? I don't want anyone to lose their life because they're dealing with the loss of someone or something. So K Marie, I thank you so very much.
Mhm.
Thank you so very much for being here and sharing your story, and even having this conversation with me, because it even brought to mind some things, like I said, I hadn't even thought of. Like, man, so I really appreciate it. I want you to have the last word, and I want you to give us a word of advice, inspiration, however you feel, and
Mhm.
also to share your social media handles with us. And I want you to do that for me. But while you're thinking about that, I'll give you a couple seconds to think about that. To my listeners, I want to say thank you guys for tuning in to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Um, if you guys have ever thought about starting your own podcast, make sure you get your copy of the Start Your Podcast Now ebook. I was being asked so many times, how do I start a podcast? And I was like, you know what? Let me make it easy for myself. So I'm not saying the same thing over and over again. So I wrote the ebook, Start Your Podcast Now. You can find it at ebooksbyejames.com to get your copy of the Start the Podcast Now. And even in the description, there is a list of beginner equipment that you can start with in order to start to build up, your thing to be a podcaster. But the way that I teach it, even in the ebook, the only thing you need is your phone. You start off with a phone and a concept. So make sure you guys get your copy of the Start Your Podcast Now ebook to really think about how you want starting your own podcast. All right. Also, make sure you go to our main website, which is the Deal Heal fulfill.org website, where you can find out more about me and everything that I have going on as a podcaster, as a speaker, as a workshop facilitator, and also you can book me to come and hold a workshop at your facility, your school, whatever it is. So make sure you guys go and check us out at dealhealfulfill.org, because again, my mission is to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problems, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Also, you can get your copy of our other ebooks at ebooksbyejames.com. We have the Four Males to Men ebook. We have an ebook called Forgiving Me, the 4 steps of self-forgiveness. And then we have the Core Four, which is the core 4 values that every daughter should get from her father, which is one of the books that we talk about on the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. We discuss those values that every daughter should get from her father. But you can get those ebooks at ebooksbyejames.com. There also is an affiliate link, so that if you really like the ebooks and you want to sell or promote them, where you can earn a commission, you also can find that information there. Again, that's ebooksbyejames.com. Make sure you guys check that out. Also, check out our inspirational t-shirt line, which includes our podcast merch, right? Go to deal2healtees.com. That's deal, the number 2, healtees.com. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tee and be inspired all day. Make sure you guys go and check that out. Again, that's deal2healtees.com to check out our inspirational tees, as well as our tees with our podcast merch, which I tease with our logos from our podcast on there. And last but not least, over the last couple of years, I've been blessed to be a part of an organization called the Forgiveness Mission. And what we do, we have free virtual workshops every other month talking about everything regarding forgiveness of self, forgiveness of others, what it means to forgive, forgiveness of the world, just really having a deep dive conversation on how forgiveness and unforgiveness affects us in every area of our lives. So make sure you guys go to forgivenessmission.com to sign up for our next free virtual workshop, or you can go to Eventbrite and just look up Forgiveness Workshop by the Forgiveness Mission and sign up for our free virtual workshops, because whenever you're listening to this, either one just passed or one is coming up. So make sure you guys take part in that. You can do it on your phone. You can do it on your laptop. It's a completely free, but I promise you that there's going to be some value in it for you. Again, that's the Forgiveness Workshop. You can go to forgivenessmission.com in order to get more information on that. So, K. Marie, once again, I want to say thank you so very much for being on, for sharing your story and your expertise. I want you to have the last word, so the floor is yours.
First, I just want to say thank you so much for everything that you do. You are absolutely phenomenal human being, and I am so honored to just know you and have this time with you. For those who would like to follow me, DM me, contact me, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, it is K Marie Speaks on all platforms. Even sending an email, you can send an email to kmariespeaks@gmail.com. And then for any booking thing, it's info@kmariespeaks. But I just want everyone to know that, again, grief it's a journey. And it takes time. And I don't believe that things happen unintentionally. If they are coming across this podcast, it's for a reason. So it's to help them or to help someone else. So I always ask people, when you see something, share it, because you could save a life. So if you're seeing this and maybe you're not in a moment of grief, it's for someone in your circle. So please share. And my final thought will be, remember, Luna, level up, no apologies.
All right. We can't end it no better than that. To my listeners, thank you guys once again for tuning in to Deal to Heal with E. James podcast, where our mission is to help you to deal, to heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Until next time, you guys be blessed. Thanks for listening to the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. Remember to listen, like, subscribe, and share. This episode has been brought to you by Deal to Heal Teas. Put some inspiration in your situation. Wear an inspirational tea and be inspired all day. Let's go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Remember, our mission is to help you to deal, heal, and fulfill. Deal with your problem, heal from the pain, and fulfill your purpose. Thanks for listening.